Welcome to Kolme Group's Clarizen Function in a Flash, where each episode we introduce you to a new Clarizen function and show you how to use it. Hi, I'm Kim Messenger, one of the founders of Kolme Group. I'm a certified PMP and I built and run project delivery organizations. And I've done a lot of that with Clarizen, which I've been doing since 2015.
I'm Tyler File, and I'm an experienced project manager with time spent on different types of projects spanning from software development to e-commerce and warehouse operations.
All right, Tyler, what function are we going to look at today?
So we're going to look at the if function.
What can you tell us about if, Tyler?
So this function is used when you want to give Clarizen a conditional command, wherein you're essentially telling Clarizen, if this is true, do X, or otherwise do Y. This is useful because most of the things we want to do in Clarizen are based on a condition of some kind. It would be rare to write a rule or an action that was absolute, as in do this 100% of the time. Therefore, the if function lets you create conditional logic.
Right. And the if statement in Clarizen is really pretty much like the if statement you might encounter anywhere else, Excel, notably, or in other platforms or other systems you might be involved in. So it's a pretty key piece of Clarizen configuration, the same as other systems.
Right. So the if function is very similar to like an if statement in Excel. It contains three parts. It's going to have a condition, a true part, and a false part. Whereas condition is what you are evaluating as a Boolean true or false outcome. The true part is what Clarizen should do if the evaluation of the condition is true. And the false part is what Clarizen should do should the evaluation of the condition be false. So if we look at the example that I have on the screen here, if severity equals critical, we're going to mark it as true. If the severity does not equal critical, it will be marked as false.
Right. And so this first part, as you say, it's got to come out as a true or a false. There's nothing else. And usually most places in Clarizen, if you try to do something that doesn't come out as a Boolean, as true or false, then it will let you know.
Yeah.
One other quick tip is, and this is a little configuration tip, is when you're configuring in Clarizen, if you want to test if a toggle field, and we have a field type of toggle in Clarizen, if you want to test to see if that toggle is true, then do this thing. If it's false, then do this other thing. In Clarizen, toggles actually have three values. It can be true, it can be false, or it can be null. So just a little Clarizen power user tip is that if you're testing a toggle, check for if it is true or is not true. Don't test for if it's false, because it could be false or potentially null. All right, Tyler, do you have an example you can show us?
Yeah, I have an example. So let's dive into a project here and look at an example. So we created a executive escalation custom field that is a toggle. So what this looks at is the importance of this risk. So if the risk is set to critical, it is automatically going to check this executive escalation toggle. And then with this, you could build additional custom actions or workflow rules that can notify executives or really anything else that you want to like kind of build off on this. This is a very simple example.
That's pretty cool. Can you show us how it works?
Yeah. So let's dive into the configuration side of it. So this is the custom field on the issue object. The field type is a toggle. It's a formula-based field. So this is a if statement that looks at the severity of it or the importance is critical. It's going to check that box is true. If the severity does not equal critical, it's going to leave it unchecked or false.
Great. That's a great example of a very simple use of an if statement. Now, we also can nest if statements. So if this, do something, otherwise, if this, do something else. Do you have an example of nested if statements you can show us?
Yes, so I have an example on the project. Let's just pull that one up. So if we navigate back to our projects, we have another custom field here, which is the executive priority. If we look into the configuration side of it, let's go back. And all right, so this is a custom field. It is a pick list, and again, based off of a formula. So we have 3 pick list items here, high, medium, and low. And then we have our nested if statements down here in the formula. So the way that this would read is if the planned budget is greater than $100,000 or in currency, it will be set to high. If that is not true, then it will go to the next if statement and evaluate that. So it is looking at budgeted hours is greater than 3 months, set it to medium. If neither of those are come back as true, the default is going to be set to low.
Right. And to repeat something you mentioned there is that when you have if nested if statements, it's whichever one is true first. That's the one that is effective, correct?
Correct. Yep. Nested if statements will evaluate from top to bottom.
Great. And I also like the layout that you have, or we wouldn't have to put it on 3 separate lines like this, because you could have it all just on one line, or there's multiple ways you can do this. But I personally like this methodology because it makes it really easy to make sure you get enough parentheses in here, because that's what you run into when you get a lot of nested if statements is, gosh, why am I missing a parentheses?
Absolutely. And it's just easier to read. If you go into a configuration and it's all in one line, it's going to be very hard to read and follow what it's trying to do. So like just breaking it up like this, I think just makes it that much easier to read and understand what's happening.
Super. Well, can you show us this one in action?
All righty, let's go to our project. So there's that executive priority field, again, defaulted to low. We have our budgeted work field. It's at 0 and our budgeted cost here. So if we change our, let's say our budgeted cost to greater than $100,000, make sure I have enough zeros in there. Let's just go ahead and set that. And it's going to change our executive priority to high because that's what it's evaluating. If we change our budgeted hours, let's say that it is, let's say it's going to take 5 months because we are evaluating if it is greater than 3 months. So let's just go 5. Change that. You can see that the executive priority field is not changing because it is already found that the currency is set greater than 100,000. So it goes with that first one.
It's still activating that first if statement. That was correct.
Correct. So let's go in here and let's just remove this budget. Let's wipe that out and set it back to 0. Now the executive priority is set to medium because it's evaluating the second criteria.
That's great.
Alrighty, things to remember. 3 important things to note about this function. 1, generally true part and false part are values to be returned. However, they can be combined with other functions. True part and false part can also be actions. 2, you don't need an otherwise in your action or rule to be able to use the function. For example, you could just need something like if project size is large, do X. Say that's all that you need. You don't need, but if the project isn't, then do Y. You don't have to have that otherwise statement in there. You just need to know that Clarizen is going to be expecting something to be in the false part. In this case, you would just use null. And number 3, multiple if statements can be used in a function otherwise known as nested if statements, which we went over an example.
Great.
Because you can use multiple if statements together, and because the if statement can also contain other functions, be extremely meticulous with your parentheses. Make sure they are in the right places and that you have closed off all of the parentheses that you have opened.
Yeah, absolutely. Good formatting, like we talked about, is really important to make that easy. Check syntax can be your friend and it can be frustrating too. And when you start putting functions in your if statements, it can get really complex. So really take a little time and format your statements in a way where it's easy to reconcile. And that's if. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Kim.
That was good. And For our listeners out there, if you have more questions on this function, feel free to hit us up at kolmegroup.com. If you found this video useful and you're really ready to take your Clarisson skills to the next level, check out the link below for Kolme University or reach out for individual consulting and training for you and your organization.